Hi, I just came back from a mindful retreat. My mindful retreat was actually just for myself, and I wanted to bring a lot of people with me, and I actually did because I felt the presence of my father, my mother, my sister, all who I'm dealing with, as release our guilts in life, our fears, and our grieving. We grieve throughout life about people we have lost. And so it's a little difficult sometimes to just experience pleasure. And those who are dealing with PTSD or have lost someone know this. They know the extreme displeasure that they're feeling because of their grief. But what I wanted to share with you today is my experience was to go to Lenox, Massachusetts, Canyon Ranch, and just receive some validation in giving myself that time to go and do some things for self-care. And it also brought me to sort of like what my father instilled in me, and it was never a direct route. That guy never took the main stream, whatever it was. It had to be an off course. So I didn't just go directly to Canyon Ranch. I had to go to Erie, and then I went to Rochester, and then I went to Canyon Ranch, and on the way back, I went to Bald Eagle State Park here in PA, and then to my home. So what I learned along the way is that you're always learning. You really are. You're always learning. If you're a person that is very aware of your surroundings, there's always time to take in some peaceful moments and also to just express yourself along the way with whatever it is while being safe. Now, I had an experiment with myself of trying to do something new in my life. And while I was at Canyon Ranch, I decided to try a class that was related to bungee resistance. And it challenged me while I was going backwards, because this bungee cord's attached to the wall. While I was going backwards after we had warmed up, it just took that extra step for that cord to just pull me, and I went straight down on my bottom, and then I backflipped and hit my head. Now, luckily, we did get x-rays and everything's all right, but then you wonder about that noggin, inside, because how many times do you hit your head and not think there's anything wrong? Well, that comes into the concussion, part of things, and understanding how you feel after you hit your head. And concussion recovery can actually be elongated and be troublesome for many if they have liver disease or they're dealing with any unstable hormones and other issues in their body. And one of the classes that I also took up there was about the chakras and about energy fields around the body. And I thought about that a lot because there are two specific ones that I'm working on. And I would love to know which chakras you're working on, because these are all in alignment with the endocrine system in our body, and the root chakra and the crown chakra and the heart chakra. Very difficult to open these doors and pathways and to understand yourself and why you might be blocking them for different reasons. But that was another thing that I learned about myself, is that I, am constantly, evaluating and trying to figure out what was rooted in my lifetime that led me here. So I talked to a number of people, and I also just embraced the atmosphere up there. That community is beautiful at Canyon Ranch. And there was someone who played country music that showed up for the first night that I was there. And so I decided to attend because I'm not a big country music fan, but I do listen to some of the songs. And this girl was fabulous. Her and her husband had voices, and that is something I've always admired. Someone who can sing and carry a tune and do it in such a delightful way. And so I'll post her, I think I already posted on my page who she was, but I sort of bumped into them afterwards and saw her with her son. And I just thought that was so delightful. And before I go further, I wanted to pause for two reasons, because I know a lot of people, when we're talking about grief right now in the world, we're trying to find pleasure, but at the same time, we're seeing in the news things that are happening that are very disconcerting. And one of them was Judge Caprio's death, who I followed and loved, and he was such a joy. And I really wanted to just jump down there and be with him in his place, but I understand that his family was around him during those last months of his life. The other person, the other unfortunate event was the two children that were shot. And I think about that scenario, and I go back to Sandy Hook and think about that scenario, and then it comes back to mental health. And those are what we try to focus on. How can we improve our personal mental health, and how can we allow others to embrace self-care and understand, how important nutrition is in our life for mineral balance, electrolyte balance, and all the connecting dots in our body. They're all connected. Every system is connected to the other system by hormones, neurotransmitters in our brain, the fluid balances in different areas of the body, and how we manage those. Also, what we're thinking about. I always talk about the 5 W's for eating, and that's part of it. But I wanted to go into just a few things that I encountered with talking to some of the people that were at these events. Deepak Chopra happened to be at Lenox, Massachusetts Canyon Ranch location, and I wondered why I didn't attend that. So I backtracked and said, Diane, why didn't you just push that button and say, I'm going to that conference? And then someone mentioned that maybe it was for a purpose. Well, maybe I needed to try this bungee thing and see if I could do it. And I definitely needed some help there. So one of the things that I talked about, and we don't really think about, everybody has a different birth story. Your birth story is different than mine. And so I was talking to someone about their birth story, and I'm like, this is what we talk about when we do a timeline tool. We use our timeline tools with our clients. And so those birth scenarios are very unique to you. So another interesting thing that came up with one of the people was that they were using a glucose monitoring system. And they weren't seeing the surges they thought they would see with specific types of foods. And but they said they were seeing these deep drops. Those are very concerning. And this is something that I like to look at with clients, is to see, what's going on with the highs and the lows. Because if you're constantly bottoming out your blood sugars, that's not good. That's not a good scenario. And there are other hormones involved related to that. And then we have to backtrack and find out it's not just what you ate. It's what you ate a couple of days ago, and it's what you did a couple of days ago up until this day. So those blood sugar glucose readings that you're getting aren't just, it's about how your body manages your blood glucose levels. So HbA1c's show a 3-month design, pattern, okay? But when you're looking at it routinely every day, if you constantly see a drop, there's some issues that you might be dealing with, and that is something that we can talk about, but it is very concerning to see those drops. Okay, so complicated pregnancies. Now, we were talking about birth scenarios, and then we were talking about, I had 4 C-sections. So what other complications do you see with pregnancy, and what do you see around a pregnancy? And what actually is considered gestational diabetes? We look at some of these 10-pound scenarios. You're saying the baby is large. Well, it might be that the baby's a preemie. It might be that you're still having a baby who has hormone issues and blood glucose issues that looks like a very healthy baby, like my first child, who was put in the ICU because he had a low blood sugar. So, when you think about these things, it's not so much what it used to be with that, textbook diagnosis. We're looking at, patterns in our triglycerides, our cholesterols, our different hormones in the body, and our blood glucose levels. And then when we talk about all the other things that come into play with magnesium and calcium and all these things, we're talking about your size. So that comes into another, pattern of, how much are we putting into our body and why. So that's my 5 W's we go into. Okay, so now we were also talking about those chakras in one of the classes. And that made me really think about the root chakra, the root chakra and the crown chakra, and how our body forms during gestation. And as an infant or a neonate, your nervous system, is forming, and the brain forms from the back to the front. So what I thought about with all this extra sensitivity with many people who are experiencing a lot of sensitivity issues. I'm talking about sight, sound, taste, all the senses. You're super sensitized. It might be that your myelination is not where it needs to be, and that your CNS fluid is not adequate and not supplied adequately nutritionally. So these are things to consider. And then we go back to the mom. What was her amniotic fluid volume? Okay, and we're talking about fluid volumes, and was it maintained? Were there these back and forth patterns where sometimes there wasn't adequate fluid for the baby to turn during that last, trimester, and then you have complications with the birthing. So we're looking at fluid balance, cardiovascular balance, and circulatory balance, and the hemodynamics that come with it in your heart, and in how much that has to work through pregnancy. So, if moms are exhausted, maybe they don't have the adequate nutrition, they're not adequately balanced with the fluids and electrolytes and the minerals that they need. And then it leads to complications post-op, which can look like depression, anxiety. You're dealing with all this, you're exhausted. You're in like complete fatigue. And since I had 4 pregnancies in 5 years with 1 loss in the second year, so I had 5 pregnancies, 1 was a loss. And I realized that I really put my body through a lot. And many women do and don't realize that this is a period of, after you have a child, you have to nourish your body and the baby. So that takes a lot of energy, a lot of sleep. You need that rest to recuperate. And if you just throw yourself back out there and just stop and forget what you're doing, don't take care of yourself and put things into your life, that you really are overdoing. I was taking care of my parents and doing a lot more than I really needed to at that time. And then you learn how to pace yourself. So some of the other things that I had a lunch with a beautiful woman who was going through addiction recovery. And I just give people courage so much. I give them, a lot of love for taking that step, because that is an awareness of, I'm doing something that's a pattern maybe in my family and how those addictions carry over. How can we stand for ourselves and be strong? And so I think that we really have to take that into consideration when somebody in your family is doing something different than what you always did. It's not that they don't appreciate where they came from or what they're doing. They're taking care of themselves. And they know that they have to maybe set some different boundaries with life in general for them to take care of themselves and be healthy. And so that sometimes doesn't look so good for some of those other people. Are like, what are you saying? This is about stepping back and saying, I just need to take care of myself this part of my life, because I did a lot and burnt myself out and nearly died. So some of the other things that we were talking about were life changes and events. And as I mentioned, with the shootings that are happening, the beginning of school season, first of all, is a huge trigger, beginning of school season. Some of the things that our parents maybe lovingly wanted to help us through maybe went in a different direction. So you got to give your children space to be themselves. They have to understand who they are. And sometimes we pressure them into being something, and just allowing them to experience life. This is very difficult for parents, and especially the helicopter parents. I will always want to understand my children and be there for them if they're in trouble. And then know when to be able to step in if they're really experiencing some difficult, or just making sure that they reach out to someone that they trust to help them through. This is always a difficult place because there are lots of nonprofits out there, but not everybody takes advantage of them, and they're not willing to be guided in the way or that's being offered. So, and it's really a way for you to figure out which one of these paths works for me. And that's something that we leave in your court. The ball is in your court, but at the same time, we want to, you're always embracing where you are with what you're dealing with and how things come into your life. What is affecting your mood, what's triggering you today, what's making something feel very uncomfortable internally, and how to go about that. Sometimes you have to be authentically angry about something in those stages of grief. And if you need to go and punch a pillow a couple times, or do some extra exercises, or do some jump rope to get that energy out, do what you can. Sometimes it's singing, sometimes it's dancing. Find ways to break away from the stress in your life and just listen to yourself. And it might be a moment of silence outside, just breathing, taking a short walk, just coming into yourself. So I'm going to leave that with you today. If post anything you feel that is really bothering you today, because this is where we forget to just let people, I want to say detox their emotions. Sometimes you got to detox them in a healthy way. And I don't think using guns is the way to do it. So I think that we can use other means to show that we're upset and that we need to detox and that we need to get our message out there. But using violence is not the best method. I don't think that's ever benefited anybody in our communities. So I appreciate you, and thank you for listening, and I hope you have a really authentic day, and I hope that you'll state your intention below and let me know how you're feeling. Thanks.